The greatest thing about America is the word possibilities. Anything is achievable if we work hard enough to achieve it. The melting pot of experiences plays a significant role in the dominance and the perception of America on the world stage. And for the majority of Americans, they still strongly believe that a robust immigration system is a positive for Americans today. And with the U.S. election for president now just less than 3 weeks away, it's incumbent upon all of us to take a serious deep dive into this very issue. And according to my friends over at Gallup News, they have some recent statistics we should all ponder before going into the voting booth this November. The publication reports 68% of Americans say that immigration is a good thing for the country to take advantage of. The majority of Americans want the level of immigration to remain the same, while 41% of the American electorate says that they want it to decrease. Also, nearly half of Americans believe that immigrants contribute to the increase of drugs, crime, and increased taxes in America today. For my friend Michael Hendricks, he's a husband, father, entrepreneur, immigration lawyer, and pastor who's been practicing law in the immigration space for over 10 years now. He grew up in central Mexico until he was 17, developing a love for culture and languages and the immigrant experience. In 2021, he began on a journey to develop the most disruptive and simplified immigration platform in the U.S. He aims to help immigrants in a holistic fashion by reducing frustration and anxiety, while also increasing transparency and affordability. His platform, which is known as Alcanza, seeks to simplify the immigration process so anyone of any education level can have access to an affordable and transparent way to apply for their own immigration benefits, which cuts out the jargon and gets straight to the heart of the matter, all at half the price of an additional attorney, while also having the comfort that your immigration process will be legally compliant and reviewed by an attorney. And Hendricks joined me this week to have an in-depth conversation about everything relating to the U.S. immigration system, how we can simplify the process of applying for legal immigration status, and how the U.S. economy is linked to the success of the successful immigration process. This, my friends, was an in-depth conversation that you can't afford to miss this close to an election cycle. So, without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Michael, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. And I'm super excited to dive into the topic of immigration with you this afternoon. Great to see you, my friend, and thanks for a few minutes.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Michael, I know that you have a wealth of experience around the subject of immigration, and with the election just 3 weeks away, my friend, I know it's an issue that's top of mind for many voters as they enter into this election season, my friend. So, when we look at the current state of American immigration, I'm wondering if you can give me your broad strokes and sort of 360-degree view of the subject and where you think the state of immigration is in America today. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Okay, so the current immigration system is broken in many ways, right? And I know that people say that, but I can actually tell you why it's broken. So the issue that we have, and I'll quote a tweet that just came out from Elon Musk not too long ago, just a few days ago, and he said the U.S. immigration system should operate like a professional sports team. We should be recruiting the best players from around the world so that we can win. The problem is that when you're too strict, you have it to where everybody says that you're a bad country. You're amoral. When you're too loose, then you have everybody coming in. So the system needs to come up to date. And there are various ways to do that with technology, with other things. And it's one of the reasons I built the system that I have was with the hopes of eventually being able to license it to the U.S. government and increase their ability to approve and process immigration at an exponential rate. But with politics, so politics and the reality are two different things, right? The reality is that it's broken. Politics says, yeah, we have a problem, but nobody wants to fix it. And here's the reason. Every time it's one of the party's turns, they'll pick up the immigration stick and they'll beat the other party over with it. You don't want to you don't want to let people in. You're an ethnicist because you don't want people coming from Arabic countries, and so you're anti-Muslim. And then the next side they set it down. The next side picks it up and says, "Boom, boom, boom! All you do is let everybody come in, and you're not doing anything to safeguard the country." So it's this whipping stick that's used by both sides. Guess what happens, Kevin? When they fix the problem, they lose the whipping stick. So nobody wants to fix the problem because it's what they use to pummel their political opponent with. But for a lot of people, like you said, it's top of mind. It seems like every 4 years, immigration becomes this top of mind issue. And then the next 3 years, it kind of vanishes into the ether. And even though the people are talking about it, none of the politicians are talking about it. So that's kind of like the high level view of where I see we are in immigration today.
Yeah, so saying that, my friend, I know this may be a sensitive word to some people, but how do we develop a compromise? We know that there was an immigration bill that didn't pass Congress because, as you said, they wanted the whipping stick to run on the issue for the election. But how do we, because this has been an issue that's been going on for decades in America and beyond. So how do we finally come to a optimal compromise in your view, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
So we have to fix. So I actually have a book that's going to be coming out soon talking about the 10 ways to improve the immigration system in America. One of the biggest ways is that we need to facilitate additional visas for certain groups, right? So, and a lot of people would say that's engineers, that's IT. Yeah, it includes those people. Doctors, we have a deficit of doctors, we have a deficit of IT, and the engineers in the country, nurses. So bringing them from other places and allowing them to come in. But you also have to look at the lower end of the spectrum if you're talking about socioeconomics, right? You have to look at who's farming, who's in the dairy industry. Now, these people make a lot of money. Who's trucking around the country? And the problem is that there are tons of areas, tons of different economic spaces where immigrants vastly outweigh or outnumber non-immigrants in terms of people who are willing and able to do the job. So we have to come to a compromise where we look at it. And so from my idea, they currently have some temporary visas that you can do. A lot of people that come from other countries don't necessarily want to come and uproot their whole family and live here indefinitely. A lot of them would love to have access to the economic system and the job system in the US, be able to earn some money, send some money back, create a different life for where they're coming from, like their family, and allow their kids to grow up in their own culture. Not everybody likes the American culture. And to be honest, we've seen a real sharp drop on our American culture recently in the last few decades, where we're really politicizing, for instance, gender ideology and other things like that. And a lot of other countries are like, oh, I don't want my kids involved in that. So we can create a compromise by saying, look, we'll give you a temporary visa to come work for a year, 2 years, and then you go home for 3 months. And then you come back for a year or 2 years, and then you go home. And this would allow employers to create this rotation, right? I have all of these people here for this year, and then that 3-month gap, I bring my next group in, they're there, and we kind of overlap, and then those people go back home, and then I bring another group in. And so you see this rotation where it would allow there to be jobs done. And this is the lower level of the socioeconomic spectrum, where the jobs would be able to be done, where it gives people access to the economic market. Our economy needs those people. We can't live without those people. If you did a mass deportation today, no houses would be roofed because 70% of all roofers are immigrant. You can't do that. You would devastate the construction industry. You would devastate the farm working industry. So we have to have people from around the world, but we have to figure out a way to make it beneficial for them and for the economy, and make it simplified enough to where people can actually use it. Did you know right now, if a U.S. citizen sibling petitions their sibling from Mexico, it takes 23 years for that process to move through? 23 years. That's a lifetime.
Yeah.
So you have to fix the time it takes as well. Providing some more of these temporary visas makes it to where people aren't trying to process through those long-term permanent residency visas. But I believe that immigration is a huge boon to this country, and doing it in a safe and legal way is the way to do it.
Yeah, and Michael, you bring up the labor angle of this, and the most recent example is what's happening with the Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, and it's very dangerous in my view to traffic and that sort of a thing, because America was founded because it's a nation of immigrants, my friend. So I'm curious to ask you about the political climate that we're living in terms of immigration, and I know that you've answered one side of the political angle already, but I'm also curious to ask you about the mis or disinformation and how dangerous that is, considering that America is a nation of immigrants at its heart. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, we are a nation of immigrants. Nobody, even some would argue, based on historical data and the Bering Strait and so on, it could be that nobody was originally on this continent. That even the people that we have as the indigenous people of America came from somewhere else, right? So in theory, at least in the modern last 1,000 years, everybody that lives in this area are people who came from somewhere else. My family, the first group of my family arrived here in 1640. That is 1642. I mean, you're talking about a long time, but nevertheless, it is not even close to the history of the world. So we are, but a lot of people wrongly call us a melting pot. We are not a melting pot. We're a tossed salad, because what we do is people come from around the world and they bring their cultures, they bring their languages, they bring their families, they bring their ideas and their religions, and they come to this country. And yes, we all cooperate like a salad, right? We all cooperate together, but we're all unique pieces inside of that group. The political climate that is created causes the problem, because what it does is it fomates one or the other side, right? Like, if you don't let everybody through the border, then you're a bigot and you hate people, right? That's not beneficial for anybody. Or we have people eating cats and dogs. That's not beneficial for anybody either, especially when it's not true, right? So you have the two sides that what they do is they fomate problems, and then that makes immigration even look bigger than it already is. So then you have modern and rural America saying, well, why do we even have these people here? We need to do mass deportations. Or why do we even have borders? We should just open it all up. You have the two sides of those coins, and neither one of those are beneficial for the country. We need to have a system that works without there being hyperbole, a system that works to allow the people to come in a safe and legal way. And that way, you guess what? You're cutting the legs out of the cartels in that case too, because if there's no more coyotes, there's no more money going to the cartels. Did you know that a few years ago, the cartels in Mexico made more money off of the transportation of petroleum than they did drugs? Now, that's not people, but the third was people. They made as much money, almost as much money off transporting people as they did transporting narcotics. So this is a problem, because what you're doing is funding people who want to do things that are nefarious. And you put people in harm's way. Whereas if you have clear rules and regulations and a border that can actually withstand those rules and regulations, and you allow there to be an open door policy where you're like, look, you do it the right way, you do it the safe way, and you can come. I think with that, we would solve a lot of these problems. And that hyperbole that we see would start to vanish because people have real information.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Michael, on a personal note, I know that you grew up in central Mexico and you came to the U.S. When you were 17, and you have developed a love for cultures and languages and all of that in between, my friend. So I'm curious to ask you about your upbringing, where you come from specifically, my friend, and what you learned about the American culture when you came over here, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
It was difficult. I'll tell you what, I was raised in Central Mexico. They took me down when I was very young. I was born in the U.S. My parents are both Anglos. We have not one drop of Hispanic blood, but my dad's a missionary, a Baptist missionary, actually. So we were raised in Central Mexico as missionary kids. So I was raised in my home as a red, white, and blue bleeding American. But outside my home, I was culturally Mexican, right? So when I come to the US, it was a culture shock. I didn't have a culture shock going. I had a culture shock coming back, because despite the fact that I was raised in my home as an American, the difficulty with me coming back here, I didn't understand a lot of the ways that everything worked. I didn't understand people. I'll tell you what, for the first several years, I didn't even hang out with other Anglos, other white people, because I was like, I didn't understand them. I felt more comfortable around Hispanics and around Black people than I did white people, because I was like, they were closer to the culture that I was raised in, family oriented, God seeking and God searching, right? Respecting your elders. And it seems like that doesn't happen a lot in the US now. And so I find immigration to be a huge benefit because of the cultural aspect, because I look at it as, we bring people in who put God first, for instance, who put family right underneath God. And for me, those are both really big things, that really big parts of having a safe and productive society. Because I use the analogy of the body. An individual is a molecule. Molecules make up a cell. The cell is the family. Those cells work together in community to make up tissue. The tissues work together to make up organs, and the organs work together to make up the body, which is the country. Whenever a molecule in a cell starts to break down, guess what happens? In the body, we call that cancer. It's a mutation. It's something that begins to break down, and it affects everything around it. And that's what we see in this country. So more people with the culture of, I love my family, I want to be with my family, I trust my family, I support my family. For me, that's a positive thing. And having culturally that come in from other places is positive to me.
Yeah, and Michael, I'm curious, outside of your immediate family and in your family as well, who were your inspirations to define your own sort of pursuit of prosperity? What are your thoughts then?
Well, I've never pursued prosperity, to be honest. I've only ever sought to do a good job. So there's a kids movie called Robots. Very profound, actually. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was made years ago in the 90s. But it's a society of robots, right? And the main robot he creates things that make everybody's life better. And what he said is, see a need, fill a need. And so I see needs, I try to fill those needs, and I try to work to the best of my ability. So I've never sought prosperity, but what I have sought is to do what is good and what is right. And to me, the foundational thing that is good and right is Jesus Christ. So if I can use him as a compass and I can say, I am working against that rule stick, that ruler in my life, and I am looking to glorify the Father, then I know that by doing that, I will do a good job and I will help people. And by helping people, of course, I will make money. And so it has been that kind of backwards. A lot of people are like, my end goal is money, and I'm going to see how I can make money. For me, that was never the goal. It's never been the goal. My goal has been to do everything that I can do to be the person that I need to be to glorify the person that made me. And guess what happens? People appreciate your work. They look to you, not everybody, I still get naysayers, but people look to you as a person that they could say, okay, I trust you because you're not looking to take advantage of me to get my money and convert it into your own. You're looking to help me. And if you can do that, you're going to do it, and you're going to do it to the best of your ability. So that's my inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know one of your inspirations is this immigration platform that you've created, my friend. I know that you've practiced law for almost 10 years now, and creating this platform, as you mentioned before, is something that you hope can aid in the facilitation and fixing the immigration process and procedure, my friend. So tell me about the platform and why practicing immigration law is important to you.
Well, so practicing immigration law is important to me because I think I believe in it, right? I believe that it's beneficial, and I believe that there are disenfranchised groups of people. I look at it as, I don't care how you got here. I want to help you be able to be in a lawful status so I can pull you out of the shadows and help you be part of society. And there's a little bit, some of it's altruism, but a lot of it it's for selfish reasons, right? Because guess what? I pay taxes. I pay a lot of taxes. I pay more taxes every year than most people make in a year, which means that I am injecting a ton of money into society. And what I don't want is other people benefiting from that aren't willing to participate in that, right? And so by bringing people out of the shadows, I know that they're now in the role to make sure that they're paying taxes too. But the other reason is altruistic. Like, I want people to be safe and I want them to feel comfortable in their home and where they live. The platform, what it did, so I've been a lawyer, like you said, it's actually been a little over 10 years now. And I've been a lawyer for this time. And many years ago, I determined, very similar to how TurboTax, you probably know what TurboTax is. Mm-hmm. You've seen it work. You just do your taxes online, you answer some questions, check some boxes, it moves you through the process. Well, what I determined was immigration is very similar to taxes. It's a paperwork-based system. Unless you're in the court system, that can be different. But most of it is a paper-based system. In other words, you're filing applications with proofs. The government reviews them and determines whether or not you're eligible for the benefit that you're seeking. They don't very rarely talk to you. Sometimes there's interviews, but 70% of them, there's not even an interview anymore. So if I could make it to where a system would walk you through this process, simplify it, walk you through the process, tell you what documents were needed, and then give you the safety and security that an attorney will review it. It's not legal representation, and it's not a law firm. What it does is it allows you to walk through the process on your own, a DIY, but with a guide and with an attorney review. And I can do that at 50% of what you would normally pay. Prior to this system, you had two options. One, you do it on your own, or you use what's called a notario, which is a person that's unlicensed and doesn't have sufficient knowledge. And you had an 80% rejection or disapproval rate, right? Rejection rate or disapproval. Or you had to pay $10,000 to go to an attorney that you may not have much better. You get a much better approval possibilities, but there's a lot of attorneys that aren't very good either. Right? But these were your two options. Either I have an 80% where I get denied or I get rejected, or I have to sell my firstborn to pay for the attorney. Well, what we wanted to do was create the middle ground, that option where people could apply on their own, but have the comfort of someone guiding them. And it's like a universe. It's like a mini metaverse for each person. The technology that we've built is amazing. But it's taken me years to do that, to simplify it and to make it to where it's affordable for the end user so that anyone can have access to it if they're eligible.
Yeah, and Michael, I know that one of the things that's important to you is helping immigrants really develop a level of trust or transparency in the system. And for anybody who may be worried about um, the way the immigration system is transparent and depending on the results of the upcoming election, they may have more than one reason to worry. But I'm wondering your thoughts on how we work with people to really increase the level of transparency and to allow these people a sense of hope that they can cash in on this dream of contributing to America and to society at large. So, how do we increase the transparency throughout this process, in your view, my friend?
So one of the ways is obviously going to be to fix the immigration system at the federal level. Now, one of the reasons I created the system the way that I did, and I'm working on improving and making it better every day, is because eventually, eventually, I want to be able to license this to the federal government to improve their process and give more transparency to the end user. In the meantime, one of the first things that a person has to do in order to determine if they're even able to use the system is they can do a free eligibility quiz. There's an eligibility quiz directly from my brain. These are the points that I use to determine if a person was going to even be eligible to hire me as an attorney at the law firm when I was at the law firm. And that is a certain questions with logic built in so that as they answer them, it brings them down this path to determine eligibility or say, hey, we need more information. That's transparency. A lot of people don't, no one even tells them, hey, yeah, you're eligible for this. They'll be like, oh, sign this contract and I can do this for you. Well, yeah, but what does that mean? Where do we go from there? How long is this going to take? What's the total cost? Like, what's my risk? What's my exposure? They don't tell them this. In our system, you have your own dashboard. Your own dashboard is your universe, and that's exactly where you interact. You can see exactly where your process is at. You can take your receipt notice once you've filed something, got it back in, pop it into the system, and it'll give you alerts. You'll be able to communicate directly with your guide through the system, immediate communication. And eventually, if I can get this licensed out to the US government, then that would happen at the federal level, which means you'll be able to send messages. Right now, the only way to communicate with USCIS, which is the agency that does affirmative applications, is through a phone number. If you call after 10 o'clock in the morning, any day of the week, do you know what you get? A number that's dead. And it says, we've taken all the calls that we can do today by 10 o'clock. And so they turn off their phone. So by doing this, it will allow messages to be distributed, not just to customer service agents, but actual processors, the people that are actually working on your process inside the government, so that they can respond. Like, I need more evidence. Boom, 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 boom. Knock it, you hit it out, and it goes to you. And that person starts working on it, has a place where they can upload that evidence immediately. So there's no more paper filing. So these are ways that we can create transparency and better processing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Michael, I haven't asked you about the southern border yet, but I do want to ask you about that because, as I mentioned at the outset, it's a big issue coming up in November. So I'm curious because we've heard a lot of rhetoric on both sides about the need to protect the southern border and to fix the immigration system. But
Yeah.
how do we cut through the rhetoric to know what's actually going on at the southern border, and what do you think people really need to know about that issue in particular as they prepare to vote in November?
Well, I'll say one thing. There's a lot of information coming about people just flooding through the border. That's generally true. That's what's happening, right? We've seen more encounters and more people flooding through. There's a lot of people getting through that aren't actually eligible for any benefits in the US. For instance, I'll give you a good example. A lot of people come to the border and say, why are you here? And they say, I'm fleeing because my husband beats me. Well, as bad as that is, and as much as I hate to hear that, that's not a reason to request asylum. Domestic violence is not a reason to request asylum. Or I'm coming here because there's no water, or there's no education in my hometown, or there's no food, or there's no work. All those are not reasons. So developing a system that actually gives a good answer at the border rather than basing it on humans, because right now you got these officers that one's having a bad day and he starts rejecting everybody, the other's having a good day and he lets everybody in. We can't do that. We have to have set processes. So that is happening. What is not happening is that a bunch of people who are very dangerous are coming in. It doesn't mean that there aren't people with criminal history coming in. Of course, if you've got 1 million encounters in a month, it's going to be very difficult to run all those people and make sure that nobody with no history ever is coming through. Should this be an issue for your vote? I think there are other things that are bigger. I think how we treat our children, parental rights, stuff like that, to me is much bigger than what's happening at the southern border. But I think a combination of, and I keep on saying I think, these are my opinions, I believe that a combination of a physical structure and technology is a great way to help defend our border and make sure that we know who's coming in. Because the fact is you have to know who's in your country, because anything can happen. People can do things. Not everybody has good intent, and it only takes 1 or 2 or 5 that have bad intent to do something like 9/11, which those people came over on an F1 student visa. Right? So the problem is not necessarily just the southern border. That's where the rhetoric hits, right? And this is a major issue, and we probably don't have enough personnel. But it's a real system-wide issue. And it includes, a big part of it is not having the processing systems in place, the base systems in place in order to be able to make good determinations about who is coming to the border and whether or not they should be let in. That's the real problem. You could have a myriad of people show up at the border. But if you have a good system that quickly determines without human error who should be coming in and who shouldn't, then you solve a lot of these issues. But we've seen them. We've seen both groups, both sides, both political parties, Republicans and Democrats, are now talking about asylum as a problem, right? I think the current administration just came out the other day and said, we're going to create a new system to where if you come into the U.S. without permission, you don't turn yourself in at a port of entry, then you won't be eligible to apply for asylum. And I'm like, well, what that does is that funnels people at least to the place so that they're not walking across the border on the other places where there's not officers, and it funnels them to where resources can be used correctly. And I think that's a positive. I don't think that's a negative. I think people should do things the right way.
Yeah, and Michael, tell me, what do you think people need to know if they're coming over as immigrants about their legal rights once they come to America, if they do it the legal way? How important is it, do you think, that people need to be educated about their legal rights and what they're entitled to?
100%. I think the first step to going to any new country is determining what the legal system is and what the laws are. Because, for instance, this is not in any way, shape, or form ethnicist, but 90% of the Mexican men that come to my office from my law firm, they either have a DUI or a domestic violence, or both. Why is that? Well, because Mexico is very similar. It has been, and it still is in many ways, very similar to the 70s in the U.S. If you were driving down the road drunk in the 70s, when the police stopped you, unless you already hurt somebody, what did they do? They'd take your car, they'd put it at the station, they'd throw you in the drunk tank, you'd sleep it off, you'd go home the next day. Well, that's very similar to how it is. The ramifications and consequences are very different. So it's very important for people to understand the legal system and how it works in the country they're going to. But I will say, immigration is very much like getting a driver's license. You do not have a right to a driver's license. A driver's license is a benefit. Immigration is a benefit, not a right, which means that you have to go into this knowing that you're asking for something, right? Like, I'm asking you to give me a benefit that I don't ever otherwise have access to. And so not being entitled either, because we have a lot of people coming over on asylum from places that are currently at war, and they're like, I deserve this. You have to give this to me. Well, no, that's not the truth. You should be grateful that somebody like the U.S. has their doors open and allows at least some people to get through those doors. And understanding that, having the right heart attitude is very important about thank you so much, because otherwise I might have been stuck in my war zone country or somewhere else. So thank you so much. So learning the legal system and having the right heart attitude, I think is super important. Being thankful for the blessing, because it is a blessing to live here. Despite the difficulties we have, it is still a blessing to live in the United States of America. And that's why people want to come, because they know it's a blessing. It's a land of opportunity. So those are things I would say.
Yeah, and Michael, tell me, how do you think immigrants play, I guess, in the pursuit of excellence for America? How important do you think immigrants are to the ecosystem of capturing our full potential as a nation, as Americans? What are your thoughts there?
Integral. They are an integral part of the growth expansion of America. I do not think that we can reach new heights without immigrants. And the reason I say that, there are various reasons, but one of the biggest reasons I say that is because by being able to help people immigrate who are adding to not only the intellectual, but the physical elements of America, that's beneficial. And like I said with the quote at the very beginning with Elon Musk, we want to be recruiting the best players, period. But we also want to be recruiting the people who are able to help supplement the workforce, because we don't have it, whether it's people don't want to work or just don't, or unable to, right? Some people are unable to, and other people just don't want to. We do not have enough people to take the jobs. It's the same reason Canada opened their doors years ago, and they said, if you can get here legally as a Mexican, right? We're not going to have to get a visa ahead of time. You fly from Mexico to Canada, we will automatically give you a work permit. Why? Because they didn't have enough people to do the jobs that they needed to do. And America's the same way. The only way that we are going to grow as a nation is by embracing a safe and expedited process that brings in the people that we need in the workforce. Dairies, for instance. We can't ever find enough people for dairies, farm labor, construction, oil and gas. There's all of these industries that are integral parts that you can't find enough people in the U.S. to do them. Either they just don't want to, or they're not capable of doing them. And so bringing people over, it's an integral part of our expansion and growth.
Yeah, and to that point, I was going to ask you, how do you think immigration in the U.S. economy are interconnected? I know you've answered it in some of your previous answers, but I also think it's important to allow these people to have an access to education or apprenticeships if they want them in order to reach our fullest potential as a nation. So how do you think education, the U.S. economy, and immigration are interconnected? What are your thoughts there?
Well, there's a current lawsuit kind of percolating in reference to having to provide undocumented immigrant children education in up to high school, and whether the parents should have to pay for it. I will say that growing up in Mexico, I was not allowed to go to the public schools. That was not something I was allowed to do because I was not a Mexican. And so it's not like it's unique to us. I don't agree with that, because those people that we're investing in are people that are going to benefit the country. As far as the trade stuff, look, ironically, I'm actually working on a program right now where we're going to be bringing people in and companies. So I don't think the U.S. government should be paying for the trade schools. But I tell you, there are companies all over this country that will pay for a person to go to trade school for them to come work for them. Drivers like CDL licensing, people that need to do different oil and gas functions, roofing, electricians and plumbers and mechanics. In New Mexico, where I live, the average age of an auto mechanic in New Mexico is 59. 59 years old. That's the average age. That means there's not a lot of young people going into the mechanic field. Well, who's going to fix the cars in the future? Some people would answer robots, right? But I look at it and I still think there still has to be a human element. So we are running out of runway when it comes to people, young people actually filling the roles that the older folks filled before: plumbing, electrician, roofing, so on and so forth. And by bringing people in, having a safe and legal way of doing it to where they're able to come in, a company will pay for that trade. And guess what will happen? That trade will benefit that company, the person that's getting it, and eventually probably the home country of the person that got it as well, as they go back and implement that new trade. And what happens when we help other countries improve? When we help other countries improve, you have less people looking to come here because now they can stay in their home country and they can work and they can be a part of the participation in that country, which then helps everyone because a rising tide raises all boats.
Yeah, absolutely. And my friend, I'm curious to ask you about the role that your own personal family plays in your own life. And what's your sort of philosophy or motto when it comes to achieving success and overcoming adversity? What are your thoughts there?
Well, so achieving success is we constantly look to do what God wants us to do. That's just how it is. That's we pray about everything. We put everything through that lens, and we make sure that it's something that we have peace about through that lens. And we know that if we do that, it doesn't matter if a person says I'm successful. What matters is that I've done what I'm supposed to do, because then I am truly successful, not about people's opinions. But overcoming adversity, and we've had a lot of it. Most people don't know this, but not too many years ago, I had a heart attack. Had nothing to do with my heart. It had everything to do with some sticky plaque in my body. But it happened, right? I was 38 years old and I'm fit as a fiddle, and I go and I'm having a heart attack. And how do you get past that? Well, I look at it the same way. I know that I am doing what I'm supposed to do. So when I reach adversity, I think in Psalms it says, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. So looking at it through that lens of, I know that as long as he is with me, I can get through anything because I'm not alone. And some people call that a crutch, and I say, yes, 100%. I am weak and he is strong, and I can't make it without him. So if that's a crutch, I happily walk on that crutch, and I happily live this life in joy, like true joy. Not materialism and happiness, but true joy that allows me to live a life that is fulfilling.
Yeah, Michael, I want to end on a hopeful note. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on what's your current definition of the concept of being hopeful when it comes to the work that you're doing, life in general, and when you look at your own personal and professional legacy, my friend, how do you want that to be defined?
How would I like what I would put as my epitaph on a
Yeah,
tombstone or something?
yeah, absolutely.
Um, he gave everything he could give for as long as he could give to help everyone that he could help. And that is I don't know that that would actually be what was written, but that's what I want it to be. I gave everything I could. I did everything I could for as long as I could. I ran the race. I finished the course. And now I am able to rest, knowing that I have invested what I was supposed to invest. And I fall short sometimes of that. But the great thing is that we all fall short. But there's grace that we have that can bring us back from that can help lift us up. And sometimes it carries us, and sometimes it walks alongside of us. So that to me is hope. That to me is joy. That to me is the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, finally, tell me if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, I'm on social media everywhere. We have tens of thousands of followers, so they can hook up with me on social media. Either go to Alcanza on TikTok, Facebook. You'll see it ALLCANZA. You can go onto the website ALLCANZA.com, and there's all the socials on the bottom. You can also contact us via telephone. And so that's the way to keep in touch with us. We'll be putting a newsletter out soon, starting to put a newsletter out, and it'll have information in reference to books that are coming out and other things and other events that we have going on.
Well, fabulous. Michael, I want to thank you for the inroads and your commitment to solving this ever-evolving issue of immigration and trying to simplify the process to allow more people to experience prosperity. My friend, your work in the space is greatly appreciated, and I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
No, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be able to come on with you.